This month's block is the Sue with the candle. Very straightforward, nothing much to point out really here. There are some small pieces, and so for that I chose to work with fusible interfacing and a blanket stitch. Then all the other pieces I've used the same freezer paper and starch method. Very straightforward. So the next step in this month's installment is to join this to the previous block, which is of the Sue's with decorating the tree. And once that is joined, then I can applique this bow, which, as you can see from the drawing, it does sit like over the seam between the two blocks here. So that will be the next step. Something I should point out about that particular block is, if you look at the drawing, this is normally what I would do with a design like this is cut out this piece from the larger piece. I would cut this out and do a reverse applique, but this would leave a very, very narrow piece of fabric with which to work on both. So what I've decided instead is to use fabric paints to draw that. Oops, here. Okay. And I get the same effect. Okay, and then I don't have to worry about this narrow edge. This is a freezer paper. Okay, see, initially I had cut out the piece, but I just realized it was going to be very difficult to applique that without any fraying. I mean, it would really be difficult to maintain the integrity of the piece. So by using fabric paints to draw those two pieces, I will get the same effect. And then for the other pieces, I am, because of these sharp edges and points, I am going to use, for the leaves I will be using the fusible interfacing technique and a little blanket stitch. And I decided to do the same thing with the circles here. Okay, so all of the large pieces, I'm using the freezer paper and starch method. And for the other pieces, the fusible interfacing. So I'm going to go ahead and applique that. I'm going to join the two blocks, applique that on. I will show you that part. And then the next part of this installment would be, once this row would all be joined with the bow appliqued, and then I can join the first and the second row. Once those two rows have been joined, then we can applique the star on top of the tree and this little dog. So the little bear and the little mouse, they kind of sit on the seam line with the third row, so that will have to wait until we finish the third row. So let's go ahead and start with the bow. Okay, so I finished appliquing the bow design. Just to recap, I used fabric paints to paint in this darker portion of the bow, and then I continued to use the freezer paper and starch method for the larger pieces, and for the smaller ones I'm using a thin fusible interfacing and a blanket stitch. And so that's how I've applied applique the leaves and the berries, and with a little French knot inside of each one. So now that this is done, I'm ready to join my first two rows in this project so I can continue appliquing some of the other designs. So the next will be appliquing this little dog and the star on the tree. And once that is done, then the two first rows will be complete, and I can start working on the third row. So let's take a look at this little guy here. The only challenge that we have here, once again, is his tail. As in the case of the Scotty, these are really sharp points here. So what I've decided is to use the same method that I did with the Scotty, and I have prepared this, turning the edges under, and so this is freezer paper, and so I have prepared this with the edges turned under, but I have cut the tail part exactly on the line, and I will be applying some fusible interfacing on this part to avoid any fraying. And I will also once again be using fray check to make sure that there's no fraying in any of these parts here. So other than that, this design is simple enough. So all of the other pieces I will be using the freezer paper and starch technique. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then applique the star also on the tree, which is this part of the design, right? So the tree will be appliqued over the seam line. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then come back and show you the finished piece so far, the finished top. Okay, so here are the 2 rows already joined. I've appliqued the dog and the star, so it's coming along. So the next step now is to work on the 3rd row, and once that whole row has been appliqued, then we can join it and finish with the smaller designs. So I hope you're enjoying this project so far as much as I am. Thank you for watching.